585 BC at 3:25 p.m. And it started with Tales of Miletus. So how do we know the exact time and for what philosophers, what some philosophers call the birth of philosophy in ancient Greece? Well, that day, May 26, 585 BC at 3:25 p.m. was the exact time of the solar eclipse predicted in advance by Thales. And Thales didn't use mythology to explain the eclipse. He didn't say it was caused by Zeus' bad mood at the time, or the goddess so-and-so fighting with so-and-so. His prediction was based on a scientific, mathematical calculation. He gave a rational explanation to an actual event before it happened. In the archaic period, there were many thinkers that tried to find answers to the question, what was at the beginning? The question was the same that they had before. What was the beginning of everything? But the answers were trying to have a rational explanation. For Thales, the origin of everything was water. For Pythagoras, numbers. Numbers ruled the universe. For Empedocles, matter was composed of 4 elements, the 4 first elements: air, water, earth, and fire. Love unites them, hate divides them. And there were discussions and adding and going on and on and on and on that period. But we go to the next period, the classical period, the shortest one, from 399 BC to 322 BC. 399 BC.
Before you go, can I add something?
Yes, of course.
Well, when you talk about Thales and this event that happened, he actually used that event to show the reason why people should be philosophers, or why philosophy should be studied, because people said it's useless, and he actually created the first form of monopoly, because when the eclipse happened, people thought it was the end of the world, and he bought all the olive presses at this time for almost nothing. And by the fall, when everybody needed to get some oil out of their olives, he actually, nobody had presses except him in the region, and he made a lot of money by putting whatever price he wanted. He later on gave all this money away and just said that he wanted to show that philosophers can always become rich, but it's not their purpose.
Let me add something also. To your list on the archaic period, we should also add Heraclitus.
Oh, we should add a lot of other ones. But what did Heraclitus do?
Heraclitus in particular, because it's the beginning of what is still one of the most profound questions in physics, which is what is primary, the particle or the wave? So where the people that you listed were all looking for the primary substance, as you say, right. Air, water, so on and so forth. But Heraclitus was the one who said, no, what's primary is process, right? Famously, you can't step into the same river twice because it's a different river. So that dichotomy between the particle and the process or the wave is still with us and on the most advanced frontiers of physics.
Yes, some people say that he introduced this idea about the change, that everything is changing, everything is flowing, everything is changing.
Right.
So that was
right. The process is primary. The objects or the particles are derived.
Yeah, that's important. Okay, going back to the classical then. The classical, the question is anthropological. What is man? What is how? What is really more about the man. And this is a time of the SPA, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. The three of them, the student of the previous one. Socrates lived around 470 BC to 399 BC, and he didn't leave anything in writing. But we are grateful to Plato, his devoted pupil, who, unlike Socrates, put many things in writing. Plato lived around 420 BC to 340 BC and founded his own school, the Academy in Athens, which became one of the most important philosophical schools at the time. And finally, Aristotle. He studied under Plato in the Academy, but left to form his own school, the Lyceum or Peripatetic School, also in Athens. By the way, he was also the teacher of Alexander the Great in Macedonia, but we talked about that before. So finally, we get to the Hellenistic period. And between the period
I'm
is...
sorry.
Yeah?
I'm sorry. I think Aristotle, he died the same day with the same year with Alexander, I think, in 322.
Greg, can you talk a little bit louder? I don't know how to control this computer.
Aristotle died actually not 347. Yeah, he died in the same, almost the same year with Alexander, 322. He lived to the old age, fairly old, because according to the thing, he only lived till like 40 years or something.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's just might be a mistake.
No, that's fine. Okay, so the time, because we cover about, we already talked about Alexander conquest and his death at 33 and the fragmentation of the Greek state. We can understand that after Alexander's death, Athens and the Greek polis were going through very, very rough times, times of change and upheaval, feelings of loss and uncertainty about the future. The question then was how to be safe, how to navigate the new uncertain times. In short, how to live a happier life. That's why in the new schools, the new schools were more than schools, were kind of something that like today we can call a sect with self-help recipes for salvation. Christianity in the first century will adopt many of these philosophical ideas and will incorporate them into their ideology. But which are the most well-known philosophical schools from the Hellenistic period? The four principal schools were Cynicism, Stoicism, Skepticism, and Epicureanism. We will start with the Cynics. If we Google a definition of a cynic today, I will say something, it will say something like it's a person who has negative opinions about others, or a person who believes that only selfishness motivates human action. But actually cynicism, the philosophy, is something different. Cynic, the name came from kinos, dog. I don't know if you pronounce it like that. It was, kinos was, cynic was a name that was actually thrown as an insult at the time, but was adopted by the cynics themselves. The founder of the cynic school was Antisthenes, a pupil of Socrates. But the most well-known cynic was Diogenes of Sinope, famous for living on the streets of Athens in a ceramic pot, urinating, defecating, and masturbating in public, without shame, like a dog. He was not living as a hermit, far from people, which could have been much, much easier for everybody. Because for Diogenes, action follows words. As a cynic, you live in accord with nature, our human nature. rejecting conventional values and unnatural desires, such as money, fame, or power. Happiness for a cynic is based on self-sufficiency, equanimity, and love of humanity. The goal of a happy life is to have mental clarity without any social impositions. Diogenes called freedom from smoke. There is also the famous story about Diogenes and Alexander that we all know when Alexander goes and visits Diogenes, that I will not tell you because you all know the story. The Cynic school declined in importance at the end of the 3rd century BC, but experienced a revival with the rise of the Roman Empire later on. The next school was one of the most popular in the Roman Empire and is having a strong following today, and that is called Stoicism. Stoicism, founded in Athens by Zeno of Citium. Citium is Cyprus, around 300 BC. Zeno was a Phoenician merchant who had lost much of what he had in a shipwreck and was in Athens. There he got interested in philosophy and started studying with the Cynics, but ended up later on founding his own school, which became known as Stoicism because they met and lectured at the Stoa in central Athens. Stoicism is a philosophy with a strong personal ethics, in which being a good person, a honest person, is the most important thing in life. Being good defined and based by them by 4 cardinal values: wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. These 4 cardinal values were later incorporated into Christian doctrine by Thomas Aquinas, and really was become very, very popular afterwards. Stoics said that there are things that we have control of and things we don't. We should have the wisdom to see the difference between them. Work on the ones that we can control and don't spend any energy on the others. Stoics also were very pragmatic. They developed specific exercise to deal with suffering and wanting. And they were extremely popular later on. The center of Stoicism moved to Rome at the beginning of the 1st century. It was adopted there by very famous philosophers and writers like Seneca, Nero's counselor, and Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, the Roman emperor that was also a philosopher. Well, the next school, skepticism. Skepticism really is much older, but it's the theory that the true knowledge in a specific subject is impossible. It originated in both ancient Greece and India, and there were several schools of skeptics in Greece. There is a famous story of Pyrrho, the skeptic. Pyrrho was one of the schools that was very, very popular in Athens. Well, Pyrrho travels with Alexander the Great to the east. And when they reach India, Alexander organized a philosophical debate, which was very popular at the time for the Greeks to debate philosophy with all the people that they met. So the debate went like Pyrrho will be for the Greeks, Pyrrho and someone else that I don't remember, and Kalano, an Indian philosopher, for the Indians. The topic of debate: what is pain? Pyrrho, the Greek, starts and talks about pain. Well, pain according to Plato is blah, 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 and pain according to Aristotle is blah, 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 and we can say that pain is really this and that, and he talks and talks, and when he finishes, it's Kalano's turn. But Kalano does not say anything. Instead, he pours a flammable liquid over his body and sets himself on fire. And while he's burning, he screams, "This is pain!" And he dies. Pirro is shocked. He can't talk. Obviously, Calano shows clearly what is pain. But at the high cost, Calano dies. The story is that Pirro goes back to Athens and never ever again pronounced another word to his students. Because for Pirro, he understood that words cannot describe everything. And then take us to the last school, my favorite, Epicureanism. Epicureanism from this founder, Epicurus. He spent his life studying what makes people happy and how to attain happiness. Because for Epicurus, the aim of philosophy has to be a very practical one. His motto, we can achieve happiness by pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. And what kind of pleasure and what kind of pain? In Epicurus' words, pleasure is the absence of pain in the body and the absence of trouble in the soul. That's a very, very simple response, but that's his very important words. Epicurus was born in the island of Samos from Athenian parents. So he was kind of half Athenian for the Athenians. He grew up in Samos and went to Athens to do his military service. Then he left. He traveled and studied abroad, and in 306 BC, gets back into Athens, buys a house and a plot of land outside Athens in the suburbs, and sets his own school, which he calls the Garden, the famous Epicurus Garden. For the Athenians, Epicurus was always some kind of borderline person, an outsider. He was half Athenian, he studied abroad, and comes back to Athens to teach. Who does he think he is? The garden definitely becomes an off-limits place because Epicurus opened the garden to women. Women were invited to the garden, and not only to participate in the debates as equals and to learn, but Epicurus recorded their names too, giving them a voice and a presence. But he also did something more outrageous at the time. He brought slaves to study and debate at the garden. The students would meet there and have a meal together. And afterwards, they would discuss philosophy. Women, slaves, students, communal dining. Definitely, the garden was borderline crazy for the Athenians. It led to rumors about debauchery at the school, orgies, and such. But we should really understand that for the Greeks at the time, or the Athenians, women were not supposed to think, less debate anything, and slaves. So obviously they were there for something else. They are not capable of thinking. But going back to the philosophy of Epicureans, there are two main themes in Epicureanism, an ethical one and a metaphysical one. The metaphysical one, the idea that the world and all of its workings can be explained by reasoning and scientific means. Everything is made of atoms, according to Epicurus, indivisible components moving around in the void. This atomic theory of the universe was not a new idea, it was already exposed by Democritus before him, but was expanded by Epicurus. Of course, in scientific terms today, the idea is very crazy, but he didn't have the scientific tools that we have today. But going to the ethical one, for Epicurus, the good life is the life of the greatest pleasure. And for Epicurus, the greatest pleasure, the father of all pleasures, is the pleasure to be alive, living a simple life, enjoying peace of mind. And lastly, because Epicurus, for him, the aim of philosophy should be a very practical one. He also had a cure for unhappiness. And I'm going to tell you about the cure. The tetrapharmakos. Tetra, for in Greek, pharmakos, medicine, and poison. The 4 parts of this recipe to cure unhappiness is 1, God is nothing to fear. 2, death is nothing to worry about. 3, it is easy to acquire the good things in life. And 4, it is easy to endure the terrible things. So 1, God is nothing to fear. Gods are not the cause of natural disasters. Everything can be explained without any appeal to gods. Gods are unbothered and unworried by humans. They're busy with their own affairs. It's bad to appeal to the gods for things, and it's terrible bad to make sacrifices to the gods to get on the right side. 2, death is nothing to worry about. We shouldn't worry about death, because when we are alive, our own death doesn't affect us, because we aren't dead yet. And when life ceases to exist, death can't affect us because we don't exist anymore. Once one removes the fear of death and longing for more life, and almost all other fears disappear, and we become free to enjoy the life we still have now. 3, it is easy to acquire the good things in life. The basic needs are easy to acquire in life. The things that they are difficult to obtain, we just don't need it. Because there are 3 kinds of desires. 1, natural and necessary. Air to breathe, water, food, shelter, and especially friends. We need friends. We are social. 2, unnecessary, natural but unnecessary desires. Expensive food, expensive houses, big houses, etc., etc. And the third one that he calls the hollow and empty desires are the desires that they are not natural and not necessary. And he means that by richness, fame, power, and immortality. So for him, for Epicurus, simple natural desires bring us peace and calm mind. Empty desires cause pain, worries, and unhappiness. True relaxation and happiness become possible with very, very little. And lastly, it is easy to endure the terrible things. Acute pain is sharp but short. Chronic pain is long-lasting but dull. But if pain becomes too intense for too long, there is always the option of ending life. Most of Epicurus' work, we find it in the writings of Titus Lucretius Carus, a Roman poet and philosopher who wrote the Rerum Natura, on the nature of things, a didactic poem with the tenets of Epicurus. Epicurus wrote many, many treatises and many studies, but almost everything was lost. So I think there were like 300 rolls, they call it rolls at the time, and maybe they're partial, maybe 3 rolls left. But in order for me to explain a little bit more the difference of Epicurus and what happened afterwards, if for Plato, and I think I have to use this, if for Plato, in order to be good, because this is also what is important for the philosophers at the time, what is to be good? So if for Plato, in order to be good, I have to renounce bodily pleasures. I have to renounce material things and concentrate on the spiritual things. Epicurus said, no, 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 no. You have everything wrong. If we want to be good people, let's enjoy life here and now. Carpe diem. Enjoy bodily pleasures, simple pleasures like being alive, and disregard totally unnecessary fears of another world that we don't know. That's it. Hello?
Okay, thank you very much.
You
Great.
didn't interrupt me. I wanted you to
Wow, this is
interrupt.
amazing. I guess we're going to open up the questions. And just to reiterate, Hadrian apparently had a family emergency. So
Oh.
I'm going to be presenting, I guess, the rest of the way. Marika, this was amazing. This was really good. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Marika. Yeah, it was very good.
Thank you,
short,
thank you.
short and sweet, and really detailed. We're going to open up for questions until I'm going to get my post up. Marika, if you would, if anybody wants the slide remain for questions, we can, or we can switch the slides and they can ask questions while we take the intermission.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Marika. That was great. Very interesting. I want just one question, somewhat distant question. How do these things come down to us? I mean, these were Greek. Did they come to us through the Byzantines, through the Arabs? Do you know what how we got the texts we have from this era?
You're talking specifically about the Hellenistic or everything?
Well, I guess all of these things. I suppose it might be different. The Hellenistic might be more from Byzantium.
Actually, I was reading that from about Epicurus. They discovered, like, and I think it was in 25 years ago, they discovered in the Vatican some writings for someone who followed Epicurus and wrote about that. And they are trying to translate and put together the writings. Some of the writers, some of the philosophers were very, very spread out, not only in Greece, but all around the Mediterranean, North Africa too. So they discovered writings in all over different places. The difficult part is to put who was saying what. And for example, with Epicurus, we know that he wrote, half of his writing is about what we call the scientific study, because for him was very important to demonstrate that science, that we don't need gods. He thought that was gods, or when you said that there's something from another world, is like with Plato, there is another world. He said that brings fear in people because you don't have any control. You don't have any idea of how to understand things. So his writing, half of his writing was about this science, more or less, and his whole theory about the atoms and how they connect and how do they form each other and all that. But I think they're discovering more and more things now. And some of the philosophers also were kind of went a little bit underground. Stoicism is very popular today. Stoicism is very popular because it kind of builds up your character. The idea is that you, if you do the right things, you are a good person, and if you're a good person, you can improve your life. So I think there are things that are very popular today.
I may add to this, a lot of writings, Greek writings that are lost to us are known because they have been recorded by other ancient writers in the Roman era, Greek or Roman, and there are other summaries or quotations, specific quotations. So a lot of it we know not in direct form but through other ancient writers. But listening to one of the courses, I I actually remember that prior to the Arab conquest and influence and its blossoming, I'm talking that happened about 9th and 10th century AD, after the collapse. The only texts that were flowing in the Western Europe, the number of them were, you'd be surprised, only about 30 in the whole Europe. So a lot of texts started to get to Europe at the time of the blossoming of Arab culture in the 9th, 10th century, 11th century, and through obviously their translations through Spain and Sicily, southern Italy, and of course, the major influx happened when the fall of Constantinople happened in 1453, you know, and a lot of immigrants from Constantinople brought a lot of literature. That was another major influx. But so to answer your questions, that they actually both sources contributed, but certainly the fall of Constantinople is within like a generation, there was a major influx of additional works of ancient.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So when Constantinople fell, I guess the idea, it was threatened for long enough so that there was a mass emigration and a lot of people had the opportunity to take their books with them. It wasn't just a sudden conquest and destruction and looting and so on.
Right, right. Yes, I'm not. It didn't happen in one day, but it happened within like a generation. Certain years before, and some years after. You know, people fled, you know, to other places, and eventually they made it their way into Italy. There's a lot of them went into under protection of the Pope. So the interesting thing I know about that Sophia Paleologue, who was a niece of the last emperor from the Paleologue branch, which was dynasty name, she was courted by Pope because he wanted to spread Catholicism to the east, and eventually she married the Russian great prince Ivan III, who is actually considered to be the founder of the Russian founder of contemporary Russia. He was grandfather of Ivan the Terrible, and he is the first one who gained the independence. So she was his spouse, and the idea was because the Papal States and they wanted to bring Catholicism and convert the Russian Orthodox, and which is Greek Orthodox, very similar back, but it didn't work out. I mean, she converted to the Russian Orthodox, and she is, by the way, grandmother of Ivan the Terrible. So it's like an interesting piece, you know, of what happened. She fled after the, or maybe before a little bit, collapse of Constantinople in that year.
So first of all, Marika, I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. I liked it because it was succinct and very clear. So I know that much of history, all of history, is faced with conflict. It's all about conflict. And I'm wondering, as the schools of philosophy arose, especially earlier on, it had to be in direct conflict with the thought that of the gods. So maybe it's time period that I'm having difficulty with. And also the fact that you said some of the schools of philosophy went underground. How was it that philosophy could exist at the same time there were people who still believed in the gods as the cause of everything.
Well, I think, for example, with Epicurus, he always said that he was apolitical. He didn't want to impose anything on anybody. And the schools, and there were many, many schools all over the Mediterranean, they were more like communes. And one thing that was, I think, critical, and because he was really against all the ideology of the Greek polis at the time, he said you have to be live and let live kind of thing. Don't impose your ideas, and don't be in the sense, don't be, you're not from one place, you're not a Greek, you're not from Athens, you're from all over the place, you're not so the whole idea of the polis, that was very Greek and very ingrained, was totally, running against that, against the he wasn't doing that. And I think they thought that some of the schools were kind of crazies. And,
Yeah, right. Out there kind of people.
Right.
And were there any consequences in terms of punishment?
Let me comment on that. The thing to understand is that polytheism is very, very tolerant, and it's performative. In other words, in polytheism, they don't care what you believe.
Right.
It's about what you do. It's about so you can carry on a sacrifice, and it doesn't matter whether you believe the God is real or whether the God is not real. You're basically demonstrating that you're a member of the community. And
so
that's much more
performance oriented. Performance oriented.
Yes, performative, very much. And it's only with, we have this sense in a Judeo-Christian world where belief and orthodoxy of belief is a life and death issue. And that was totally foreign. And to the extent that there were people who believed that, the mainstream thought they were crazy. They thought they were fanatics.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's explained it very well.
I think Lisa had a question, right, Lisa?
I think that it's already been answered, but let me just try it. I'm trying to picture like how these schools actually, interacted with one another. Like were there like big debates that were in like the Stoa? Where they really tried to stay separate? Did students, gravitate towards just one school and follow the one kind of main teacher of that school, or did they gravitate towards other schools as well?
Well, you can see some of that in Plato's dialogues, because Plato has Socrates confronting Parmenides, who was a philosopher, and other. So Socrates himself is constantly debating people who are representatives of other philosophical currents.
Well, and is that very Greek, that they love to debate and expose their ideas? And
I think it is.
Yeah, me too. I think it's very great. They're the ones who invented philosophy, and the discourse and the democracy itself means that people gather and discuss and vote. That was pretty unique idea at the time.
It's also interesting to situate this within the Hellenistic world. So I think people are familiar with the Great Library of Alexandria, which is associated with an institution called the Museon, from which our modern word museum comes, which was established by the Ptolemaic dynasty. So the Ptolemies saw this being a center of intellectual life in the world as being a way of promoting their own prestige. And so it gained political importance And during this Hellenistic period, there was a looking back over the achievements of the classical era and before, and among other things, the invention of modern literary criticism. So during the Hellenistic period, the Museon was essentially a research institute. And there were critical editions and commentaries that were issued on all the ancient authors, particularly Homer. There were what you might call antiquarian trends, so that people would start understand that that Alexandria in the Hellenistic period was as remote from Homer as we are from Shakespeare. So there's quite a distance, and there were basically revivals of archaic modes of expression. So people would write plays in the in the style of Euripides. People would write epic in the style of the epic poets, of which we have a number of examples. The most notable one is the Argonautica, the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece. So this idea of being self-reflexive and preserving, right? The Alexandrian, the scholars from all over the world would be attracted to Alexandria, and it was a good way to make a living if you were a scholar, and you'd rise in the hierarchy of the Museon, and it was a tremendous career, and it was like being a modern scholar, where you spent your life studying ancient works, and so really kind of a modern sense of the academic world is born in this Hellenistic period.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to being a librarian was a great honor and prestige, especially chief librarian. And prior to like 3rd century BCE, obviously all of the major philosophies flocked to Athens. Like you mentioned, Diogenes eventually came to Athens. Pyrrho went to Athens. Epicurus. They all flocked because that was the center, and it stayed center for a long, long time. But then in the 3rd century BC, another center started to form, which is Alexandria. So one of the most notable chief librarians of Alexandria is Eratosthenes, who lived in the 3rd century BC, like maybe the second half of it. And he is considered to be the father of geography, because he wrote a lot about the actually this Aristotelian idea that we know right now as Ptolemean idea has actually also been promoted by him.
Also, the study of science. I mean, there are a lot of discussion of, did the Greeks actually invent the steam engine, in the context of just kind of a gimmick that was used to open and close curtains in a temple. It wasn't used for any sort of useful work, but there was really quite
an idea,
quite an accomplishment and study, and a robust academic life. And then there was competition. So Pergamum, which was a very, very rich city, tried to compete, and successfully established itself as another center of intellectual life. And so the academic accomplishment was became a way of competition between the monarchs in the Hellenistic period.
The great library, Pergamon, was famous for having a library that rivaled Alexandrian library.
And all of these people would then compete with each other to give to be philanthropic towards Athens, because they would all credit Athens with being the origin of most of the thought. So they would compete with each other of who could give Athens more lavish gifts. And famously, I mentioned in my presentation, the Pergamon dynasty donated a new stoa, the stoa of Attalus, to Athens, but the Ptolemies did similar things.
Interesting. Marika, can you stop sharing? Sorry, on top.
Yeah, if you tell me how.
On top, it has a red button. It says stop sharing.
That's easy to follow. Yes.
All right, let me just share mine. If anybody else had any more questions, I mean, my presentation is going to be a completely different topic.
But just let me say thank you very much, Marika. It was really well organized and really enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Here,
Thank
here.
you. Thank
It was
you.
wonderful.
It was really amazing. And mine is not going to be as organized because it was kind of composed last minute, because I only was expecting to talk for about 10 minutes. So now I'm going to talk a lot more. Sorry. So what are we going to talk today about? And thank you, Marika, again. We're going to talk about War of Heavenly Horses. You know, the kind of like not really talked about topic because of the fact that this is the first interaction of the Chinese civilization with the Western civilization, which is Greek civilization, Hellenistic. So, you know, who was the interaction between? It was between Alexandria, you know, Escarte, which is the Bactrian, you know, piece or kingdom that's current day Tajikistan, and the Han Dynasty, and particularly was the Emperor Wu at the time. And again, I'm not an expert on both, so if you can stop me and you want to add something or I said something correctly, please do, because again, I was expecting another presenter, didn't happen, and Marika covered so she did an incredible job that my job wouldn't really matter that much, but whatever. Anyway, so what is the Alexandria Escarte? When Alexander the Great started, embarked on his campaign to conquer everything in 334, he kind of made his way to Fergana Valley, which is right here. And I'm just trying to show where it is. And if you look at the bottom, the Alexandria Escarte is on the right side. You have the Scythia on top. This is called Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. So as you know, a lot of his generals, which called Diadochi, basically after his death, in 323, kind of divided it up, and this became a part of Seleucid Empire. And since it became part of Seleucid Empire, but what was interesting, when Alexander the Great went into the region, he established 8 different cities, right? And obviously he loved himself a lot, so a lot of the cities were called his name. And one of the cities were Alexander Ascarte, which means the Alexander, and it's the furthest part of the empire, okay? This was the furthest part of the empire at the time. Now, what's happening is when he invaded there with his army in 329, he was surprised. He actually saw a lot of Ionian Greeks, and he was like, what's going on here? I don't understand. How come this Bactrian kingdom has a lot of Ionian Greeks in there? And apparently they weren't just Ionian Greeks. I mean, they were Greeks from North Africa. So what Archimedean Empire, when they had it as a satrap, sorry, I have to admit somebody. When they had it as a satrap, so what happened is they had a kind of their culture to resettle people. If, let's say, there was a dissension, for example, in the city called Barca, which is North Africa, there was King Darius, for example, resettled, deported all Cyrenaica Greeks because they refused to give up their accused assassins. And so he basically resettled the whole North African Greeks into the Bactrian area. That's quite a long trip. Xerxes first had exiled, during the spring of Diademe, a lot of, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Bronchidae Greeks, priests, basically into this area. So there was a lot of religious transfer as well. So a lot of the people near the mainland Greek, there was not that many Greeks as there was many Greeks in Bactria already. So you can imagine in this area in Fergana
He's
Valley.
warning Fran to come in.
I'm sorry? What?
Somebody's just not mute, was talking a different conversation.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I muted you, but I'm sorry. Okay, anyway. Please mute yourself, guys. I apologize. It's kind of, disturbing a little bit. So now what's interesting is, so you have this Ionian Greeks with their own identity living in this area of current Tajikistan, but they were part of Seleucid Empire, which was, if you remember, there was Ptolemy, Seleucid, all these different areas of Diadoches, but they lived there prior to that. So now, if they lived in this area and they kind of created their own Greek identity, they decided that they want to go on their own. Okay. So when they basically decided to go on their own, because of their own identity, there's this king. His name is Diodorus. I apologize. His king name is Diodorus, which is I'm going to show you in a second. That's his face right here. It's only what survived is only his face on the money that was discovered in the Alexandria de Escartot. And just to show you example, on the right, that's how the Bactrian people looked. So on the left, you can clearly see Greek features, and on the right, you have dark beards. This is how the Bactrian people look. There's a Bactrian ethnicity of the time, mostly Iranian type of people or Archimedean type of people. And then here on the left, that's how Diodorus, that basically rebelled and declared independence of Bactria kingdom from Seleucid Empire. Now let's jump into about 100 years further to the east. Prior to that, I want to talk a little bit about the Han dynasty. What is a Han dynasty, right? Started about 206 BC, during the revolt of Qi emperor, and basically, to make a long story short, there was a rebellion, and Han Gazu started the Han dynasty, and this is how you looked. This is Han Ganzu or Li Bang. That was the first emperor of the Han dynasty, and the particular one we're going to talk about is that basically had interaction with Hellenistic Greeks, were the Emperor Wu. If you look at the timeline, you have Emperor Hanzu, and then Emperor Wu is about 7th in the line of succession, that lived between 87 BC and 141 BC. And the war of the heavenly horses between Hellenistic culture and the Chinese happened during the Emperor Wu of China. So just to move further, what is their how was the government run in the Han dynasty? Basically, they have very strong policy. They lowered taxes. They stopped bureaucracy. Officials helped rule. On the left, you can see that they actually had exams for civil service tests. So they have a professional civil servants already at the time of the Han dynasty, and then further on in 106 year when the BCE, when the war of heavenly horses happened, tested knowledge of the Confucianism. The Confucianism was already up and prevalent. So geography. That Han dynasty was the biggest dynasty, bordered by Yellow Sea, eastern China. And then you have different rivers divided by Western Han, Eastern Han, Frontier Han, split between fiefs and princedoms. And it's actually what's interesting, which I will point out. Gobi and Taklamakan deserts were nearby. Taklamakan deserts. Gobi is the second largest desert in the world after Sahara. So the first one is Sahara, second one is Gobi, and Taklamakan desert is right there as well. So it's quite a large land into the desert. obviously it was a fertile soil in Zhangjiang Basin. And, part of it was so big that Himalayas, Tian Kunlun Shan, and Altai Mountains were part of it as well. So let's just, what is their accomplishments during the Han Dynasty? I'm just going over what the Han Dynasty was. So it was the longest lasting dynasty. Now, the science and technology, what did they invent? Invented paper, sundial, which is on the left, you can see, gunpowder, iron, porcelain, also had acupuncture and chemistry, new medicine, had bronze coins, new agriculture technology, religion was Confucianism, okay? So going forward, and we're gonna go through different events. So the empire was, obviously established in 206, 141, abandoned legalism of Confucianism, 138 established Silk Road, and War of Heavenly Horses happened in 104 to 101, okay? So that's basically the timeline of it. All right. So what I wanted to do is I want to show first how the Han Dynasty stretched. As you can see, this is a Great Wall. And we'll particularly talk about the people that lived outside the wall and why it was important for them to acquire heavenly horses. And this is pretty much how the Han Dynasty looked. So let's go into the presentation about heavenly horses. So now, what happened is, basically, as I've stated, what happened is Han Dynasty was struggling a lot with people that's called shoju, which is spelled in this manner, but basically a short spell of it is Sorju. Who are they? They're basically predecessors of the Hans. So they attacked and ravaged the countryside of China all the time, and basically Han Dynasty had enough of it. It was like, you know what? We're declaring war against Hanju. We're gonna gather our people and we're gonna go into it. But prior to doing that, they sent their envoy, and basically the envoy name was Zhang Quang. And what happened is Zhang decided to go west to try to look for the people that's going to help him fight Xandu. And the people he's looking for is called Yaji. And I think Yaji, what you would think is, you would probably think of first Turkic conglomerate of tribes that actually fought Hannu and lost and left the Hannu go into a different region, which we'll talk about which region they went to, basically into Tarim Basin right here, and therefore basically went and conquered Fergana Valley and Greeks in particular. And Greeks were already kind of under the this people that's called Yaji, who was running away from the descendants of Hans into this area and conquered the Alexandria Escarte. So what's happening is this envoy, Zhang Quang, now is going west, trying to get help for the imperial China, and particularly Emperor Wu, to fight Hanji, Joshi, who were descendants of Hans, and asking for help from Yanji. And then what happened is he meets Greeks in the Fergana Valley, which is Alexandria the Escarte, and basically prior to that, he actually got captured by Hanji. So they captured him and said, "What are you doing?" But they treated him so well. He married a woman of Hanji, Joshi the descent. And then when he married a woman, he had a son with her. But after 10 years, he said, "I've had enough. I'm going to escape." So he escaped to look for this. And he was, interestingly enough, very loyal to the Han emperor, Wu. And after 10 years of captivity, still had that idea in mind that we need to find help to fight these people. Otherwise, they're really, causing us a lot of trouble. So he goes into this region, asks for Yaji help, but they told him, you know, after getting captured and, you know, running away from captivity, you know, they told him, no, we're not going to help you. So then, okay, well, what am I going to do? You know, I didn't achieve my goal from the emperor. So I'm going to go into the Fergana Valley and I'm kind of hang out and see what's going on. So he goes to the city called basically Escarte Alexandria in Bactria. And this is him, by the way. His name is Zhang Qin. And basically, let me talk about a little about him. He was an officer of Han Imperial Guard and even volunteered for a critical mission, which is I was telling you about. The critical mission is to find the allies. And he was sent across the Huanu territory, which I was just saying that he was captured by them, investigating, bring back the info. This starts his exploration on the Silk Road. So this is the beginning of a Silk Road because of him kind of exploring it. Now, he goes into Ascarte and he goes, wow, this is unbelievable. These people are so advanced. I mean, they have, you know, amphitheaters. They have incredibly, you know, sophisticated dwellings. And they're very shrewd in how they do business. And he was, you know, his explanation is, you know, he basically saw this, you know, bright eyes, heavily bearded human beings, practicing Greek, you know, Greek philosophy, Greek religion, Greek everything, drinking, you know, grape wine, and he didn't understand any of this. And all of a sudden, he encounters the fact that they also have an amazing horses, amazing Fergana Valley horses are unbelievable. And basically, you know, when you looked at the horses, and he goes, "Wow, they're incredible war horses." They even said that after sweating, those horses were kind of producing. Good.
Yeah, sorry, but would they trade with who? I mean, they were trading with the West. I mean, how do they?
West and the East. I mean, you can think about it. They're Diadochi. So Seleucid, they were part of Seleucid Empire. Then they broke away, Bactrian Kingdom by this, and then became independent. But they still traded with Ptolemy, you know, Diadoches. They traded with Macedonia. This is a huge Macedonian / Ionian conglomerate. So they traded with the West. They're trading with the East. They're trading with everybody they can, you know, trade. They can find to trade with. I mean, not China yet. This is the first encounter of Chinese with the Hellenistic culture. So when he went into this area, he didn't know what to call them. So he called them Dayuan, which means that, you know, Ionian Greeks, basically. He called them Dayuan. That's the name. And he said, you know, the man had deep set eyes and thick dark beards. They lived in sophisticated city dwellings and were lovers of grape wine. He also visited cities like in Bactria, where he was impressed by the complex urban lifestyle and shrewd skill in trade and commerce. However, he noted that Dayuan, which was Ionian Greeks, are weak in martial prowess and are afraid to fighting. I mean, you can think of it, you know, when the Greeks came to this 200 years prior to that, they were had martial prowess, but this is already a decline of this area, right? We talk about, you know, 126 BC, this 200 years after. So obviously they lost their deaths, they were in decline. So while the cities endured, which is this city of Alexandria of Escarte, but it had been conquered by very same Yanji people. So the people that he's trying to find a help from, they're actually been conquered. They conquered this Greek people, but the problem is that you know, Zhang Quan realized that they also won't give him help. But it's interesting enough, he found that they had an amazing horses. So this is, you know, the horses. This is the explanation of his explanation. The mounts had powerful crests, short and stocky legs, and round barrels. They possessed a remarkable endurance and made ideal war horses. They were even said to sweat blood, although this was likely product of blood-sucking parasites in their mane and caused blood to mix with the sweat when the horses were worked. So he said, wow, these horses are amazing and they're sweating blood. That's how crazy they are, and there could be incredible workhorses. And Chinese never seen anything like this in their life. So now he returns to China. Let's just look through some of the slides. He returns to China after going through all this area, and he goes, and he keeps saying, listen, I didn't get you any help, but guess what? I found out there's horses in Central Asia that we could use to fight this Joshi, the descendants of Hans, and win the war. So now, obviously the Emperor Wu decides, okay, let me send my best general. His name is Li Guang, with 20,000 Han infantry and 6,000 cavalry to invade Alexander the Escarté. Okay, so this is the first. So Li Guanli is a general that basically is employed by Emperor Wu. Now try to invade this area. So let me go back to the map in a second. So this is a Han Empire. Now he needs to still get through all this area to get to Fergana Valley. So he goes through this general through Talcoman Desert, right? As I explained to you, it's interconnected with Gobi Desert, the second desert in the world, the largest desert in the world, and Tarim Basin, which is this Tarim Basin. In Tarim Basin, there is a Tocharian people that live there, and they cause all kind of problems. So he has 6,000, cavalry, 20,000 soldiers, but there is all the skirmishes that get into the fights, and he ended up loses, most of a big chunk of his men. Comes to Alexandria Escarté, and now he wants to, break into the city. Doesn't have enough forces, and Greeks are pretty well fortified. And let me just jump for a second. This is the fortification. This is the siege weapons that they use against the Alexandria Escarté. It doesn't happen. Goes back to China, and talks about how he can invade Fergana Valley, Alexandria Escarté. The emperor gives him 60,000 soldiers, and on top of it, he gave him 100,000 oxen to be invading into Alexandria Escarté. Now he's going back. Now all these people, Tocharian people in this basin, in Tarim Basin, was giving him problems, seeing these big warriors, coming in, so many soldiers, they're scared. So now they're giving supplies, they're not fighting them anymore. But still, he loses half of his soldiers through going through desert, going through all those problems. And with 30,000 soldiers, he reaches the Alexandria Escarté, and the fights break out. Now, of course, Greeks. There's really a lot of vague information about the fight itself, but the Greeks put up a good fight. 40 days they held out. Okay. Then what happens is after 40 days, they see they're losing the bureaucracy of the town, cuts off the head of their king, brings it to Chinese warriors, and also promises them with 3,000 horses. But the trick was, out of 3,000 horses that they want, the Fergana horses, only 300 are good ones, which were actually from this region. The rest are just simple horses. And then obviously, he returns, Li Guanli returns to China with 3,000 horses. He's a hero and all that stuff. But this is the first interaction that they have between Hellenistic culture and Chinese culture. What's interesting is this interaction developed the Silk Road, right? So now we have a Silk Road. So there was an exchange of ideas. Apparently in Buddhism, there's a lot of interesting ideas that come from, Greek, and, they're further on. What's interesting, the horses, the 3,000 horses that were brought in were used. I mean, they were bred, and in about 96 AD, Han Empire finally defeats Joshu using the horses from the Bactrian kingdom. So, they learn how, how to do grape wine. They get ideas from Greek, and in Buddhism culture, the Buddhist statues are being depicted in the Greek fashion. And so there's exchange of that idea is in Alexandria Escarté, people switching to the Buddhist religion because there was an exchange of culture. So that's all I have, my friends. Anybody has any questions, let me know. Sorry, this was a last minute gathering because, we'll just go through some of the slides. If you have any other questions, let me know.
I like your maps. They're great.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Can you
So-
put the map back?
Sure.
Yeah. Because it will take a long time to go from the Han Empire to the valley. I mean, going through all this, going back and forth too. I mean, this is.
Yeah, and then that's why the boy was captured by Shoju, and then he, after 10 years, he already kind of established his life. He still remembered that he had a mission to accomplish. So he still went to the Fergana Valley. I mean, after 10 years, you have a son and daughter is like, they treated me so well, forget about my emperor, I'm gonna stay. And he didn't stay, which shows the him being very dedicated.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
and it was a big, go ahead, sorry.
yeah, I have a question. So this is all like happening around 300 BC, right?
No. This was if you look at the map, the War of Heavenly Horses happening 104 to 101 BC.
Oh, okay.
The
So
establishment of the Han Empire was 206.
oh, okay, all right. So yeah, because Bactria, and I was thinking Greco-Bactrian, it was sometimes right after the Alexander, right? But anyway, so it looks like around this time, 100 BCE, right? That's when you're saying the Silk Road was kind of established, right?
Well, they're saying around 138 to 126 BC.
Right. And I just wondered, did they trade silk before? I mean, was it was
No,
like,
it was not traded. And in fact, what happens is now Chinese conquered you say Tajikistan, current Tajikistan, Uzbekistan area, Turkmenistan area, and they put outposts everywhere. So now they have outposts where people are not scared to go and trade. They defeated Joshu, which is descendants of Han, driving them away from the Western world. We all know where Hans went, right? To Western Europe and,
yeah,
Eastern
later
Europe.
on. That's
Yeah.
much later. Yeah.
Right. But this was their predecessors.
Right.
So what's happening is now they put outposts everywhere, and they, after the Greek, culture collapses and all that stuff, they trade heavily with Rome because of the fact that the outposts are available. That's where the silks start flowing a lot. The trade with Rome, that's when it was happening. A little bit later on, maybe in AD or something. I don't know exact date, but so because of the outposts, they were able to put in these different areas. Chinese outposts. This was their, basically this kingdom's paid, paid tribute to Han emperors, and therefore they were all considered to be Han lands, basically.
So they controlled all that area, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Zach, I could elaborate on that a little bit. Could you go to the map?
Sure.
Yeah. So you see the core of the Han Empire, and then you see that finger sticking out west through the Gobi Desert. And as you say, that salient, that protuberance was the beginning of the Silk Road. So they had to control that in order to get to the west, and that was that, in a sense, was really, it was a bit of a precarious thing and required a solid central empire in order to control that. Now that's mostly Gansu province in modern China, and at the very end of that salient was the town of Dunhuang, which was sort of the border post of China proper. Beyond that, where the Tarim Basin is, that's now Xinjiang. And Xinjiang was, of course, has been a disputed area sort of perennially, and in a sense still is, in that they're non-Han people, they're not Chinese speaking, they're Turkic peoples, they eventually became Muslim. people. So they were they were a bit of a foreign group to China, but in this period, China did develop this trading route. And you see on the Tarim Basin, there was the northern Silk Road along the northern side of the Tarim Basin. The Tarim Basin is just complete sand desert. There's nothing there, and mountainous on both sides. So it was really an obstacle to trade. But the Han Dynasty, as they expanded its territory proper to the edge of the Tarim Basin, and then developed protected trade routes along both the northern edge and the southern edge, those dotted lines on either side of the Tarim Basin. And that put them in contact with the Greek, the Middle Eastern world. So at that point, there was a contact between the two that allowed trade. At other times, when you had several independent, hostile groups, you just couldn't trade through there. But at this point, the Han had control areas it controlled across the Tarim Basin, and putting them in contact with the, I guess it was the Hellenistic, well, no, I guess it was Hellenistic areas at the other end of that route, and they were not particularly in conflict. So at that point, trade and the Silk Road became much more feasible. Thanks.
Yes, appreciate the addition. Any other questions? I just wanted to show.
Zach, I have a question about like today in Uzbekistan, how much of the Chinese are present? I mean, not the new Chinese, the old Chinese. Is there any?
Well, the Uzbeks themselves are actually a recent invention. Uzbek means I am my own bureaucrat. That's what it's translated.
Really?
To. That's what it's translated to. They came from actually from the from this Golden Horde. So the Golden Horde was the Genghis Khan's area, and there was a Turkic tribes that fought for the Golden Horde, and one of the first Uzbeks that came was in 600 AD. So this is a long time after. The Uzbeks don't represent the people that lived in the area at the time. Okay, so there was no Chinese influence to Uzbeks whatsoever. They actually came from, you can think of the Golden Horde was situated around, where the Russia and stuff. Go ahead.
Zach, yeah, I could add something to that linguistically. I'm not sure, you may know more about the ethnic relation, but Uzbek is a Turkic language,
Correct.
and Uyghur is a Turkic language. And Uyghur and Uzbek are more closely related than any of the other Turkic languages. Uzbek is more closely related to Uyghur of Xinjiang than it is to Kazakh and Turkmen, for example. So yeah, so the Uzbek language and the Uyghur language are quite closely related. They're among the most closely related of the Turkic languages of the area. Thanks.
They considered to be at the time it was a part of the big Khaganate, Turkish Khaganate. Turkish Khaganate was the initial Turkish empire that was established on the outskirts of China, stretching from Tibet all the way to Uzbekistan. So that's what it is. And in fact, how close this part is, when Soviet Union during Nixon time did not speak to China anymore, and China still abuses Uyghurs, in Uzbekistan they established a freedom radio that broadcasted into the Uyghur area, you would think of it like a BBC area that was broadcasted to Soviet Union. This was a freedom radio that was broadcasted to Uyghur area from Uzbekistan because of the same language, pretty much.
Yeah, Ralph. By the way, I have a question to you because you're a language expert here, and so I know that Tajik is closely related to Farsi, but Kyrgyz Turkmen, and Kazakh, I think also Turkic languages. But
Correct.
then you said that Uzbek and Uyghur connected more. But how do the other three languages, the Kazakh, Turkmen, and Kyrgyz, how are they related to whom? How is that? Why only Uzbek related?
Well, yes, yeah, they're all Turkic languages, and I guess it was Kazakhstan was the original home of the Turkic-speaking peoples of the Turkic language, and they gradually moved south and particularly east. Um, so they're all Turkic languages, and they're all related. I guess, so I don't know the exact history and migrations, but yes, Uzbek and Uyghur are most closely related, and then Kazakh, Kazakh, Uzbek, no, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and Turkmen. And I guess Kazakh and Kyrgyz are perhaps particularly closely related, and somewhat more distantly related to Uzbek and Uyghur.
Yeah, that whole area, and how these countries formed. Well, Uzbekistan is kind of separate. I understand, and this is the Fergana Valley. This is very prominent amongst them, I think. But still, it's interesting. We may, I mean, I'm not that much familiar with how all those nations now form, like Uzbek, Kyrgyz, Turkmen,
Yeah,
Kazakh.
and Tajikistan, as you mentioned, is an
Yeah.
Indo-European language. It's
Right,
quite a
right.
separate people and language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess a lot of those areas originally were, as we know, populated by maybe Aryan tribes, and later on got uh, Turkified, I would say. Yeah, as with the Turkish migration from the east. But yeah, maybe Zach, somebody would want to research this and actually present how this whole area formed into this nation.
Well, Uzbeks are actually descendants of Yenisei Kyrgyz. They all come from Yenisei Kyrgyz, if you think of it. And Yenisei Kyrgyz was, in all respect and purposes, are Tartars. So it's just a deviation of Tartars and part of the being a big Kaghanate. It's all kind of intervening. In fact, Timur Lame was not 100% Mongol. He was actually Balash, which Barlas is he was half Turkic, half Mongol. But that's the Barlas. So they already got to intervene, and there's a Mongolian blood involved. So there's all kind of a blood mixture going on in the area. So Timur Lame is considered to be descendant of Genghis Khan. He had nothing to do with Mongols. He's only half Mongolian.
But I just wonder, what maybe Rolf knows. What about Tatar language? Is that more Turkic or Mongolian? You know, Rolf?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't think Tatar is a language. I think that's more of an ethnic group.
But they have their own language.
I guess maybe I guess it's Turkic, but I don't know.
They do have their own language.
There is a language called Tatar?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm guessing, but I believe I've heard that it is Turkic.
Yeah, it is Turkic.
Yeah, I also think it's more Turkic. Yeah.
But Tartars was called anybody that they came from Mongolia that were Turkic descent, but they doesn't mean they're Tartars. There's Bashkirs were kind of intermixed in it. There was no people didn't know in those times any better. They just called them Tartars, but they were all kind of people coming.
Yeah, but eventually they do form a nation of Tartar, right? As we know, the remnants of those
the Crimean Tartars, the Golden Horde, correct? Yeah.
Right. The Golden Horde disintegration into a few. We know there are Crimean Tatar. There are Tatars who on the Volga River.
Right.
So,
is gonna
but they're all the same language, by the way. The Crimean Tatar and Volga Tatar, they had the languages the same Tatar, and then also and that's the remnants of those hordes that are disintegrated eventually, probably around the 16th, 17th century.
Correct.
But still, I'm just saying we probably won't be able to get to this. But it just got me interested in that area that I don't know that much about, and how those Middle Eastern, Middle Asian nation formed. I mean, we got to look into that. That's interesting.
Well, Rich is doing the Turkic
Right.
people presentation. And
Yeah,
then
maybe we'll get
there,
to
we
that.
need a couple of more presentations on that. I mean, I realize that this is an interesting topic. And in fact, before the breakup of Soviet Union, the only Turkic nation was Turkey. There was no other independent nationality outside of Turkic, Turkic nations. And they used to be huge. They used to be, Kaghanate, Seljuks, all kind of people, Khwarezm Kingdom. It was all Turkic, So it disintegrated into just one country.
Yeah.
I just did a little research, and Tartars is an ethnic group, and it's called an ethnonym, and it encompasses basically a confederation of people from many different places, and was unified by Genghis Khan. I mean, there are.
Well, he fought against Tartars, and
First, and then he will.
and then he fought against Tartars.
And then he
Tartars killed his
assimilated.
father. Tartars killed his father, and he declared a blood label against them.
Yeah, but
And
that time there was a tribe called Tartar, but eventually this name was applied to many nations, mostly of Turkic origin that were in Asia, nomadic. Yeah, but eventually the ethnos is formed that's called Tatars out of there and for a few hundred years already, and But besides that, the other ethnos formed in the form of those countries. I know the countries themselves formed fairly recently, probably sometimes in the 18th, 19th century, but maybe even later. But they do have ethnic identities, separate ethnic identities.
Well, it's all vague. I mean, everybody thinks of Timur Lenk being their descendant. In Kazakhstan, they think it's their hero. In Uzbekistan, it's their main hero. In Kyrgyzstan, they're all confused right now. Soviet Union had completely done a number on breaking
I know, but I imagine that people who think of themselves as Kazakh, they don't want to say that there is no difference between Kazakh and Turkmen, right? They have different identities right now, not just countries, but identities too, right?
Well, let's just say
their language is somewhat different. Huh?
Except for Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, prior to the Russia creating the area that they call Turkestan, there was no nationality. They were nomads. Kazakhstan and Turkestan and Kyrgyzstan were nomads. They didn't have national identity or the ethnicity to begin with. Uzbekistan's had a national identity, was Khwarezm Kingdom, Bukhara Kingdom.
Right.
The Tajikistan had a Khwarezmian Kingdom. In Bukhara, there's 90% speaks Farsi. They don't speak Uzbek, but it's part of Uzbekistan.
Oh wow.
In Samarkand is 85% Farsi. They don't speak Uzbek.
And in Tashkent?
Hojan the same way. Tashkent is 100% Uzbek. I mean,
wow.
But it's part of Uzbekistan. So Soviet Union didn't care who it belonged to. They just covered it up the way they wanted.
Yeah. All right.
Any other questions on Han, on the Bactrian escarpte, the furthest of the, any other additions that anybody wants to give, or? Okay, if not, then, we guess, we were supposed to have another presenter. Apologies for that. We're meeting on Thursday, and my friend Paul is going to present on history and metallurgy. Should be an interesting one, so please do visit. And on Saturday we have another one on the series of World War II. We'll talk about Joseph Goebbels, Minister of Propaganda. Should be an interesting one. And then on Sunday, right after, we're gonna have 3 next week. We have Israeli 11 Wars presented by Rich.
Okay.
And you'll post those.
It's already posted. Everything's posted.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Okay.
Hey, Zach, I had a quick question, if you don't mind. It's Central Asia. It's more of a 19th century, or no, 18th century sort of question. There is a YouTuber that I follow called Bald and Bankrupt. Some of you may have heard of the guy. He's traveling in Central Asia right now, and I forget where was it. Maybe it was Tashkent or something. I can't be exact, but one of the things he mentioned for the Russian military's motivation for entering into Central Asia, he was saying that Russians at the extreme part of the border, the southeastern border for that matter, were being kidnapped and taken into slavery by, lack of a better word, the Central Asians there. Does that ring true with you at all?
I'm sorry, repeat the question again. Apologies.
Okay, well, how far back?
No, kidnapping part.
What the guy was saying was that people in Central Asia were kidnapping Russians who were living at the edge of the Russian Empire there, and that formed one of the motivations.
Not Central Asia. About Caucasus region, not Central Asia.
This guy was talking Central Asia, so if it doesn't ring true for you, then
I don't know. I don't know anything, because Russia actually invaded Uzbekistan, Turkestan area in a great war with England. That they were playing all this great game. Sorry.
Yeah, the great game. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was in 50s of 1856 or something.
That's when the Crimean War that was taking place, right?
Correct. So Crimean Tatars did have a slave trade market. That's why Russia invaded. I mean, they said one of the reasons they invaded, Crimea at that time, not currently, was because of they were stealing Russian and selling it to Ottoman Turks, and that's why you have a lot of the Janissars and stuff. There was a lot of Russian blood that's in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Janissars. Yeah, Janissars.
Yeah. So that's why Russia used it as a main reason to invade Crimea, which was it was protected of the Ottoman Turks,
Right.
And they said it was because
warm water port, I would imagine as well.
Yeah, it was because they were stealing Russian children and whatever, selling them in a Russian living.
But that's
Zach, and
early.
when you said invade, sorry, you said invade, do they stay there? The Russians, they set posts?
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
they depopulated the whole area. They actually put a lot of Russians there. Even prior to Stalin, they a lot of the Crimean Tatars were deported during the Tsar's time.
The Russia conquered Crimea at the end of the 18th century during the Catherine the Great reign. So it was that early. That's one of the and since then it's been very contested territory. So we're talking about the late 1700s, and that's where they built a lot of Russian cities there, like Sevastopol and Odessa. All that. That's not in Crimea, of course, but it's on the Black Sea there. you know, that was the time when the Russia expanded in that area. What was the name of the third lover of the Count? What? Zach. Just escaped.
Right. Yeah. Any other?
Potemkin, Count Potemkin. Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah. Yep. So this is it. Anybody else any other questions? If not, I'll let everybody go. Thank you again, Marika. Incredible job. Not so much for me, and appreciate it. And then I hope we learned something new today. And we'll talk on Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday next week if you guys join.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey, so long, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.